Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Los Angeles Public Library YouTube and Facebook channel. My name is Dora Ho. I'm the young adult librarian from the Los Angeles Public Library. I'm so excited that you are all here with us today for another fantastic program for teens. I also just want to give a special thank you to the Library Foundation for helping to make this program possible. I used to be doing a K-pop program every month at the Central Library Teenscape. So you're all in for a great treat today with our exciting programs. In our program studio today is Maria Sherman. She's a music writer, cultural critic, and author of Larger Than Life, a history of boy bands from New Kids on the Block to BTS. She has worked with a senior writer. She has worked as a senior writer at Jezebel, managing editor at Gizmodo Media Group, senior correspondent at Fuse TV, and contributor at BuzzFeed Music. You may have seen her work at NPR, in Billboard, Spin, Rolling Stone, Entertainment Weekly, and many other quality publications. If she were in a boy band, she'll be the bad boy. Let's welcome Maria.
Hi, Dora. Thank you so much for having me.
You're welcome.
All right. Well, I am so grateful to be here. This is an incredible program. I've been catching up on YouTube, and especially given the subject matter, I think about K-pop all day long, and I'm sure many of you watching do as well. Or perhaps you're here because you're just sort of curious about how this phenomenon came to be, or you're a casual fan, all of that stuff. We're really going to break it down to the basics. But before we jump right in, a little bit of a caveat. My book is about a history of boy bands. It begins in the 1800s with the origins of boy band fangirl fanaticism and that sort of screaming enthusiasm and all those things that we know and love and do when we're allowed to go to concerts, in a pre and hopefully post-COVID time. That said, I'm a Puerto Rican American. My experience with this music is certainly colored by that. I do not pretend to be an expert in the South Korean music entertainment industry, but I do have a great understanding and a certain expertise in how it came to be this phenomenon here in the United States, especially with a sort of music industry that has been historically very close-minded to music performed in other languages and from other international organizations or entities. So with that said, let's jump right in. Where did K-pop start? It is a big question, and it is one that's maybe a little bit more complicated than anyone could maybe think. It's the same for any sort of music. There are no definitive histories. There's only understandings of cultural movements. If it was black and white, then you would learn it in school, right? The way that I like to begin the sort of K-pop conversation is taking it way back and thinking about how here in America, what Americans' first exposure was to Korean music and how that kind of leads us to the groups you love today. And that requires going all the way back to the 1950s and 60s. To set the scene, from 1910 to 1945, South Korea was colonized by Japan. From 1950 to 1953, the Korean War took place. We have North Korea and we have South Korea. There's a lot of turmoil happening. And yet, sort of post all of this, there's this group called the Kim Sisters, a group of Korean singers who perform English language covers who make a huge splash on American television. They go on The Ed Sullivan Show, which is a very old school program that certain people of a certain age watching this might be familiar with as the place that exposed the U.S. to the Beatles. And they sort of blow up. They go on The Ed Sullivan Show 20 times. The only group to do that more are the Muppets, Jim Henson, like Big Bird, all of those guys. So they're a big deal. And I'd like to play a little bit of one of their songs, one of their performances, so we can get a sense of exactly what that looked like and what Americans' first experience with Korean music was for a lot of us. So pretty different from K-pop or BTS, right? I think there's like a book to be written about the fact that they're wearing traditional Korean hanbok. They're performing not in English. They take it off. They're wearing sort of Western garb, and the reason is to appeal to a Western audience. If you do your research in this and you're very interested in the origin of this kind of group, they used to wear traditional Chinese garments as well to appeal to U.S. soldiers and the sort of U.S. Presence in South Korea, which is confusing and more so meant to appeal to American Orientalism. Obviously, there is a history of anti-Asian racism here. There's a tendency to think of East Asia as some sort of monolith, which is just simply racist. And I hope, with the growth of K-pop and sort of becoming more understanding and inclusive, we stop thinking in these sort of black and white terms, quite literally in that clip, black and white. In the years that follow, we're talking 70s and 80s, South Korea goes through a couple of autocratic regimes. Rock and roll is banned for a period of time for fear of it being protest music. Folk music starts cropping up. We don't really get big pop music for a while until the 80s. Prior to that, there are really two dominant forms of music. There's nationalistic music that's meant to further patriotism, like I Love Korea type jams. And then there is trot, which is based on sort of a Japanese folk style. And those are love ballads, very, very like G-rated, super soft. Basically, those are your two options. They're also controlled by an ethics committee, basically all sort of governed until South Korea becomes a democracy in 1988, and everything sort of shifts gears pretty dramatically. Now they're able to, there's a travel ban that's been lifted. There's so much, you can study so much different music and art from different places. You can look to the West and draw inspiration from there. You can look to Japan, the second largest music market in the world. There are a lot of places to find influence. And it's in that late 80s, early 90s period where we begin to see the origins of Hallyu, which is the Korean wave, which is this idea of there's growing international interest in all things Korean culture. And that's not just K-pop, that's Korean barbecue, that's K-beauty products, that's K-dramas, those sort of Korean dramas that do really well, especially in the Middle East, because they're a little bit more modest than a European telenovela. So there's growing interest in what's happening in Korea. And for K-pop, most critics and historians seem to think that the sort of first group that really breaks this new format, that brings in all of these like interesting musical elements that we consider to be K-pop, is Seotaegeon Boys. And I would love to play a little clip of one of their songs here. If great. Oh, that's that was actually the wrong clip, but I think that's my fault. I mislabeled them, but we can talk about this group. This is a HOT. They're created by a big K-pop company called SM Entertainment. This is the same era. This is like mid 90s. They're very much more of a bubblegum group, but actually, could we play a little bit of it's the first link that I failed to label it. It's just above the HOT song. Okay, I think we might be having some technical issues, so I apologize for that. I'm sure that is my bad, but certainly should listen to it. It's very early 90s hip hop. So what has happened was there's this new group, they're a trio called Seotaegeon Boys. Oh. Great. Yeah. So this is the group. The song comes out in 1992, and there's kind of like a pivotal aha moment in the K-pop story. They go on a show on MBC, which is a major television network, and they perform this song, which is very much it sounds like what was happening in the States or in Europe in the early 90s, this sort of old school hip hop thing. The judges hate it. They get the lowest marks. And yet it has this incredible impact on Korean youth. They're interested in this hip hop pop, like melding of things. There's a moment in that song where the production almost becomes like metal, it becomes very guitar oriented. It's all over the place. And yet it is so interesting and sort of immediately hooky. And people are really into it. And it sort of sets the tone for K-pop being a little bit hip hop, a little bit pop, and using all of those sort of 90s influences. I mean, they blow up to such enormous size. In the press, they're referred to as the Korean New Kids on the Block a lot because of their like rapping, their incredible sort of impeccable choreography, their street style fashion, all of that stuff. And that makes us think about the 90s sort of in whole as a decade that's really pivotal in the K-pop story. There's the formation of a big three entertainment companies, JYP, SM, and YG. These are like major labels that have sort of ultimate control or more so of like a one-stop shop. Think of like Warner Brothers or Capitol or Universal or Columbia, where some of your favorite Western artists are signed. It's like one of those, but also artist management and artist agency. So everything is in-house, which allows artist development to happen pretty quickly and be very streamlined, which was one of the reasons why K-pop is, able to be as successful as it actually is. There's also something to be said about the fact that those companies are named after initialisms. They're named after like their initials of the people who operate them and founded them, which allows for, global understanding. And it's through those companies, we have this interest in hip hop and pop. We have these companies, and then there is some historical stuff that really causes K-pop to blow up. Bear with me, it's a little geopolitical. This is also where people will typically ask me why K-pop was able to blow up as opposed in the United States, as opposed to, let's say, Chinese pop or J-pop out of Japan. And a lot of it has to do with the fact that South Korea is pretty small. Right now, the population is only 51 million. And because of that, to make money off of a music industry, it has to export music as if it's some sort of trade good, because it is. In Japan and China, those music industries can sort of sustain themselves. I mean, obviously they do export, but they don't have to rely on that. So a lot of the K-pop model, and even the fact that it's called K-pop, named by Koreans K-pop to sort of signify that we are sharing this with the world, really speaks value to how brilliant the sort of marketing and the music business behind the scenes was. But in the late 90s, and I'm not an economist, so we won't go into too much detail, there is the Asian financial crisis. The world is worried that there is going to be this horrible economic depression. And since we're all one planet, it could be devastating. So South Korea borrows a bunch of money from the International Monetary Fund, the IMF, and to pay it back, because now they're in debt, they don't want to be in debt, they come up with a couple creative ways to sustain itself, to sort of pay back this debt. One that I think is so interesting is they actually asked citizens to donate gold and have it melted down and pay back the debt that way, and many did. But what's relevant to K-pop is the government decides we're going to allocate 1% of our entire budget to art, with the ambition that Korean culture is going to be the next big export. That is what people are going to want from Korea. And, BTS is proof. It works outstandingly well. But it wouldn't work if the music wasn't good, if it wasn't this constantly evolving phenomenon. So that's where we get to the question of, we have this money, we're in the late 90s, how do we get to 2021, and what even is K-pop? It's not a genre. That's sort of the first step after understanding the sort of historical information that gets us here. It's a lot of genres. You'll listen to a song and we're going to go through the sort of eras of K-pop where there's some pop influence, there's hip hop, there's neo soul and new jack swing, all of these like 90s things that are sort of filtered through Backstreet Boys and NSYNC, if any fellow millennials are watching. There's electronica, there's R&B, there are ballads. It's not simply a genre. Which is something that happens a lot in a little bit of a misunderstanding with Western music. We tend to think of things as genre. Like when we hear Latin pop, we think of that as a genre. That also isn't a genre, but that is a conversation for perhaps another host. What K-pop is, however, is a multimedia experience. you're not meant to just listen to it. You're meant to watch it, like we are going to in a minute with some of these music videos. You are meant to watch some of these idols in dramas, on variety shows, in vlogs. You are meant to learn the dances. They do a lot of ads. They do like beauty crossovers. Everything becomes like this multimedia storytelling experience. The best way it's ever been explained to me is think about K-pop, maybe use BTS as the example, as something like the Marvel Cinematic Universe. You don't just read the comic books and go see the movies. You can participate online and sort of drum up some conspiracy theories. You talk on social media. You create communities around it. It's more of like a whole experience, really, which is, you know, beautiful. And I think music is something that we live, and it makes a lot of sense for that. K-pop, also the way that it is used here, is typically meant to describe the idol industry, which means it's not just Korean music. It's not just Korean pop music. It is Korean pop music created by one of those big three companies that I mentioned earlier that go through a studio system, not unlike your favorite pop star being built or being trained through Disney, or in the 60s, a group like the Jackson 5 or the Four Tops learning how to become better performers in Motown. So there's this thing called the idol system, where all of these stars are made through a training system where, you know, they'll move into dorms, they'll practice their choreography, their dancing, they'll take etiquette classes. It's sort of a 360 experience to make sure that the best performers are the ones that debut and that we get to know and love. I mean, there's a reason why their choreography is on point, more so than maybe some other Western pop artists you love. Don't hate me for that one. But it is also very exclusive, and it's hard to kind of make it to the top. You know, I remember in like 2010, there was this piece that came out that said only 1 in 10 trainees makes it to a debut. I imagine that number is probably slighter now with the growing interest. So now, with all that information, we know the history. We know how K-pop sort of originates. We know that there's an idol industry. We know that it's not a genre, but it has evolved. The way that we talk about that K-pop evolution, again, isn't a genre, so it's not necessarily specifically musical. It's about all these other things that kind of come together. And the way that we describe it is through generations, kind of like how you would talk about waves of a certain kind of music. And these are contested. Some people will say certain generations start before or after another, but they're basically just meant to help us understand what groups or what artists came when and what the climate was like culturally, and how the industry sort of changed. So the first generation we already heard from. That's Seotaeji and Boys. That's HOT. This is the era where we're starting to see idol groups work. They're doing this bubblegum pop thing like that HOT song. Fandoms are cropping up and being very, very supportive, sort of immediately engaging in fan service. Fan chants start to crop up, which is, if for the people who maybe are a little unfamiliar with K-pop, if you ever go to an event or go to a live show, you'll notice that fans will name a group's members in age order. That's called a fan chant. That sort of crops up here. This is the 90s to the early 2000s. The second generation kind of grows from there. And I would love it if we could hear a little bit of Girls' Generation to showcase this second generation, ironically enough. So this is starting to look a little bit more like how we might think of contemporary modern day K-pop, especially if you are sort of new to this world. And this is like the period of like 2003, 4 to 2007, 8, 9. It's a little contentious. Just think like mid to late aughts. This is when K-pop is really starting to go international. And when I say international, I don't necessarily mean the United States. I mean, they're looking to Japan, again, the second largest music market. They're having a lot of success there. There's the soloist BoA, who comes sort of in between first and second, at least in my conception. And she learns Japanese. TVXQ is a boy band that does the same. They're starting to work to appeal to a broader audience. I chose Girls' Generation because that song, if it's familiar to some of us, it might be because you were an early YouTube user. In 2009, it was one of the first like viral videos, to the point where they were invited to go on David Letterman and perform. And the video is great, but it also sort of signifies that there was interest in K-pop happening stateside, but it hadn't yet exploded. Another example of that is Wonder Girls, who is a Girls' Generation contemporary. They toured with the Jonas Brothers in this time, and that's like old school Jonas Brothers when they were at Disney, and they were very much a sweet boy band. And people were into it, but it didn't really establish K-pop as this large mainstream phenomenon as we sort of know it today. Which, you know, it sort of shows that, like, if you were in on it, perhaps you could have found your K-pop fascination in kind of easy to spot areas. But for some Americans, it didn't really stick in the way that it would soon afterwards. And that sort of brings us to what I'm calling the third generation, which overlaps a little bit. That's 2008 and 2009 to like 2012. And this is where YouTube is really starting to blow up. So much of K-pop discovery is predicated on getting exposed to it on YouTube and then really engaging in fandom after that. And this is also where girl groups and boy bands start to really play around with concepts. It becomes even more maximalist, and the concepts for music videos become even bigger and more massive and just over the top and so like stimulating and beautiful. And the groups get a little edgier as well. For a long time, girl groups and boy bands were this bubblegum thing. They were very, very sweet. And now we're seeing that change a little bit. And I would love to show an example of that if we could play a little bit of Big Bang.
Wow, fantastic, baby. 이 난장판에 끝한 널 차례 땅을 흔들고 3분은 엄부충분한 race 분위기는 wire catch me on fire 진짜가 나타나
하나부터 열까지 모든 게 다 한수.
What's very Big Bang played KCON, the sort of annual Korean conference here in the States. Now it's kind of in so many different countries. I'm not even going to pretend to know all of them, but certainly in LA and New York, and it's always a good time. I hope we can do it again in person soon. But they made it a point to play in the States, and they got to the point where they were growing like a nascent fan base of K-pop fans in America. And it worked really well for a while. It seemed like they were going to be the group to sort of really fully break K-pop in the United States. The rapper G-Dragon has worked with Diplo and Skrillex and all these Western artists and a lot of collaborations in that way. Of course, that didn't happen for a variety of reasons, but it certainly set the tone. Like now we're drumming up success. K-pop is just getting bigger and bigger and bigger globally. And then I would love to play just a snippet of a girl group to sort of counteract that. If we could do 21, I Am the Best.
내가 제일 잘 나가 제일 잘 나가 Oh my god. 누가 봐도 내가 좀
Yeah, Some of you might remember that tune if you're unfamiliar with this sort of third generation of K-pop from a very popular Microsoft ad in 2014 that was kind of all over the place. And kind of imagine that group next to something like Girls' Generation and G, where it's so sweet and there's sort of these ascending harmonies. And this is a lot more hardened and edgy and sort of cool. I mean, it's all black and they're wearing leather. So it sort of showed that now how we perceive girls, or women rather, in these girl groups is starting to evolve. And of course, they too have some success in the States. Doesn't blow up in the same way as some of the artists that we're seeing now. And that might be because they did come around the time, or a little bit before rather, the song that really breaks K-pop in America appears. And that, of course, is Psy's Gangnam Style. And maybe let's hear a little bit about that to remind ourselves of the monster hit.
오빤 강남 스타일 강남 스타일 낮에는 따사로운 인간적인 여자 커피 한 잔에 여유를 아는 품격 있는 여자 밤이 오면 심장이 뜨거워지는 여자 그런 반전 있는 여자 너는 선호해 낮에는 너만큼 따사로운 그런 선호해 커피 시키
Yeah, how can that not put you in a good mood? That song became a bit of sort of a viral super hit, right? All around the world. And you're hearing this get radio play, right? And it's all over the world. And in America, in places that might not even have like a large Asian diaspora, where you're not really going to be exposed to K-pop, it's no longer just the YouTube phenom, but that's kind of where it begins to blow up. And it does a lot of things that we see K-pop do successfully now, which is, other than being an irresistible hit and having those strong hooks, there's a dance equivalent that is easy to sort of mimic. I mean, obviously dance has always been a huge part of the K-pop story, but you could do that sort of horse prancing dance he's doing very easily, even if you're not a trained dancer. Which is, it just sort of speaks to, they figured out the equation of how to do this really, really well. And after Gangnam Style happens, the question becomes, is K-pop a novelty in the US, or does it become this huge phenomenon? And of course, we know the answer to that with the fourth generation of K-pop, where we start to see K-pop groups touring the US more frequently. They go to Australia. Girl groups and guy groups change. They can change what their concept is. They don't have to be sweet or edgy. They can be whatever they want to be. And this is the era where we get a little group called BTS. And why not hear some mic drop?
잘 나가서 미안해 엄마 대신해줘 네가 못하켜도 우리 콘서트 절대 없어 hold on I do it 너 말 없는 라다 do it 후배가 아프다는 고소해 소리
Just in my bag, just in my bag. Sell a coffee, sell a pack. What you think about it? What you think about it? Let it got my haters on your stack. Come and follow me, what you saying, yeah. I'm so fiery, for your tender. Keep on running until I catch up. How you there? I'm not.
Wow, I was blushing a little bit. I love that group so much. So BTS, they debut in 2013 on Big Hit Entertainment. This is not a big three company, but they do a lot of things that other groups are starting to consider, but really kind of go all for it. One of the main reasons they sort of explode in the States is they were coming here more often. The K-pop marketplace is now being very saturated because more and more groups are seeing the success of others. They decide, we're going to really kind of push our focus elsewhere. And then, of course, there's social media, the fact that they're so talented. There are a variety of reasons why they were the group to kind of explode. There's also, to add just one more, maybe geopolitical ramification. In 2016, the U.S. put a military installation in the north part of South Korea. The Chinese defense thought that it was meant to spy on them and boycotted all cultural exports from South Korea as a ramification, sort of causing South Korean music market to send more things to the United States. And that's the year before BTS really breaks in America. I think it's sort of widely accepted to be 2017, because that's when they play the Billboard Music Awards, and when they're doing late night, they're on Jimmy Kimmel, all of this other stuff, sort of unavoidable. And from there, we're either still in the fourth generation or we're in a fifth generation. It really depends on how you think of it or who you talk to. I like to think that there's another generation. There is a fifth generation, because now social media is sort of the gatekeeper. It's very easy. The path to access for K-pop is much less than it once was. And now it's common to have international members in your K-pop group. So it's not just Korean members. And a great example of that, and I think the perfect place to leave off on before we jump into questions, is Blackpink, the quartet. Let's hear them.
How you like that? You gon' like that? Da 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 da. How you like that? How you like that? Da 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 da. Now, look at you, now look at me. Look at you, now look at me.
So yeah, so it's for incredibly talented young women. One of which is from Thailand. The other three are Korean, but one spent a lot of time in Australia. The other one spent a lot of time in New Zealand. They sort of cover a large percentage of the world. And that's K-pop kind of extending its sort of definition of becoming this global force, where now you don't have to be Korean to be a K-pop star. And that lends a lot of questions to what the future of this music is going to be. And if history has proven anything, it's just going to continue to get bigger. Thank you.
So Maria, we do have several questions in our chat box. So would you like to answer some of them?
Sure. I see that there's a question about songs in a public playlist. I don't have a playlist, but I did build one for NPR that I could throw in the chat, like a little starter guide to K-pop. One thing you will notice is that the generations are a little bit different, because, as I said, they do sort of change as time goes on. Do you think having... Oh, sorry, next question. My apologies. Do you think that having a member fluent in English helped BTS? Absolutely. I think that it took a very long time, and we're still working on... When I say we're, I think I mean like American pop music fans still have some hesitancy to embrace music performed in other languages, which is not the case for much of the world. Much of the world, you know, they might not speak English and they'll embrace English music. There should be some sort of transference. But I think, you know, maybe in the future, it won't matter what language somebody speaks, but it certainly has helped. And then also speaking English, fans are able to get a sense of the personalities of the group. So, I mean, they could always read subtitles and watch a Korean variety show, things of that caliber.
Yeah, and they always say music is a universal language anyway. So
absolutely, yeah. Yeah, but you know, it does help, and also as a journalist, selfishly, it helps me to be able to communicate. But I should be taking Korean at this point. And then Dana, my apologies for not knowing which pronunciation, says BTS is part of third gen, but they didn't blow up until late third gen. Fourth gen started 2019, 2020. Yeah, that's kind of, I see it that way too. But of course, you know, it can be sort of, it's a little complicated. It's a little nebulous, but I certainly agree with that. And then they add that a great example of a multinational group is NCT with Thai, Japanese, Chinese, and Korean members. Yes, yeah, I was going to include an NCT song in here, but I was worried that I was playing too much music as is. But I will link to that playlist. And it sounds like many of you probably have your own playlists that I would love to see.
Yeah, GOT7 is one of them, but they are now have disbanded. So yeah, unfortunately.
Yeah. Are there other questions I'm not seeing or comments?
I do have other questions for you, if not.
Okay, great.
So as K-pop grow in popularity, do you think that we ever have pop instead of K-pop?
Yeah, that is something I think about all of the time, because there is, even though K-pop wasn't created by the Western music market, there is a tendency in American music industry to sort of otherize music that isn't in English, right? We call Latin pop, but there are so many Latin American countries. For a long time, and I've seen this less so, but I imagine it still happens, music that wasn't sort of European or American or North American would be referred to as world music. What does that mean? The world is a huge place. And sometimes I see the embrace of K-pop feeling similarly, though I think as time goes on, we'll continue to see it as just what it is, which is pop music. It doesn't matter what language it's in. Also, if more and more performers in K-pop groups aren't necessarily Korean or it diversifies in that way, maybe the K is a little inaccurate. But right now it does inspire curiosity, I think, for a lot of Western listeners. They want to know more about Korean pop music or idol music rather. And the K is helpful in that way, but I do hope that one day, it's all pop. We should just call it pop.
Yes. Do you think would there ever be a K-pop group as girls group as big as BTS?
Yeah, I think Blackpink is huge, but also this is interesting because this is something I actually have some knowledge of specifically because of writing the boy band book, which is historically in America and in the UK, but more so in America, girl groups don't get as big as boy bands do. Boy bands kind of come every generation, every 5 to 10 years. Girl groups don't really happen that way. Like the last big American ones we had were Destiny's Child and Spice Girls were from the UK, excuse me. But the Western girl group tradition, I think a lot of that is based on who gets money in the industry, not so much that people don't like listening to girls, because people do love women performing. So I think it's only a matter of time before we see an artist kind of blow up to the size, or a girl group rather, blow up to the size of a BTS, because I don't really think K-pop is going anywhere. It's only getting bigger and bigger and more innovative and exciting.
Well, we have a girls' generation, 2NE1, so,
Yes.
we have Blackpink, we have, 101. So,
Twice,
we have so many of them, but they just don't make it as huge as BTS, but they're still very, very popular.
Of course. Yeah. And I do think that, Rose from Blackpink is promoting her solo stuff right now. I do think that they will kind of get to the same level. I mean, we need them.
Okay, let's see if there's any other questions out there. We have several comments. Yeah, thank you. Yeah. All right, let's see if I can ask you another question.
Okay, great. Yeah, I appreciate the comments too. Thank you everybody for participating and watching.
What do you think the K-Con has kind of influenced K-pop? Because, it brings in so many groups each year to, participate in K-Con. So does that really help the K-pop industry, you think?
Oh yeah, that's a great question. And I think it certainly does. I've gone to many, many K-Cons, especially here in New York. And the fact that K-beauty, there's so many beauty products and there are all these other facets of Korean culture represented. There are people who aren't even there for K-pop who go and experience all of this stuff, which is only going to broaden their interaction with stuff that maybe otherwise they wouldn't. And honestly, I will listened to anybody who's playing KCON on repeat to sort of prepare myself for the show. And I don't think I'm the only one in saying that. And I think that sort of colors your taste a little bit as well. And, you know, there was a time period not that long ago where it was like you're only going to get one big K-pop concert a year, even living here in New York. So you better prepare, like plan your life around it. And now there's KCON. More and more groups are coming to LA, New York especially. And it's only getting bigger. And being able to see something live certainly confirms your appreciation for it, I think.
Right. There's a question come in. Let's see. We can see this one.
This is from Sean. Oh, that's my friend Sean. Hi, Sean. Do you think Gangnam Style is solely responsible for the US charts factoring in streaming and YouTube data? That is fascinating. That I actually don't know. I don't follow the charts as closely as I should. I'm more of like, I do more like sociocultural stuff and he knows that, but that is interesting. I'm not sure. I apologize. I will have to get back to you on that.
I'm sorry, missed one question before that. Let's try this one. Let's see. Keep showing. Okay, let's see. Here we go.
Can you talk about the power of K-pop artists in fashion, for example, Kai and Gucci? Do you think we will see that in the States? Yeah, absolutely. I think that also this is a question that speaks directly to something that had I had more time, maybe we could break out a little bit more. And I just wanted to play 1,000 songs. Is that experiencing K-pop and being a K-pop fan really is a multimedia experience, right? You're watching it, you're listening to it, you're buying product, you're engaging online, you're doing these fan communities. But a collaboration in fashion is an extension of that. And, you know, in the West, like our pop stars, of course, have like deals with fashion brands, and we're all very much aware of that. Sometimes for music fans, it's sort of extra, it's like an elemental thing or ornamental rather. But for K-pop fans, it's so much part of the experience. I mean, like I certainly look at YSL a different way now that like Rosé is the face of it from Blackpink. There's certainly, I completely think we'll see more of that.
Yeah, because when you go to concert, you always buy all the stuff. There's so much stuff that you can buy, like, all the things regarding your group. So, it's nice, so I really enjoy KCON because, you get to meet with the artists, sometimes with some of the, engagement activities, or you can listen to the concert. You can go, check out many things. So it's just so wonderful. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, let's see this question.
What do you think made BTS be the breakout group? Yeah, this is something I think about all the time. Also, I think there are a lot of like factors to this, in the same way that there are a lot of factors to why like K-pop like exploded when it did in America. Again, because I want to be very specific. That's what we're talking about here. With BTS, I think a lot of it was coming to America more frequently, because just kind of showing up, word of mouth does a lot. Really involving themselves on social media and like speaking fan to artists. That's something that we've always loved. It's something that sort of started, I think, at least in Western teen pop tradition, with like Justin Bieber being very vocal. And then we saw it with One Direction, which brings me to my next point. One Direction had just broken up. There was a hole in the music market for a group of young jovial boys who can sing, and well, One Direction couldn't dance, but now dance, and there was a space for that fandom. I can't tell you, I have so many private Twitter lists of just fan accounts, and it felt like overnight, once One Direction was over, it was like BTS town, which was so cool to see that. Language didn't bother fans of pop music, or wasn't even a factor. Everybody was just so on board with this incredible group of performers. And there are probably some other sort of insidery business stuff that I'm not privy to, but I think it's probably a combination of those things I just mentioned.
Now, do you think that because many of the groups, usually they don't last, because they always say there's a 7-year curse, because and a lot of them has to be related to they going into the military service as well. So
Mm.
do you see that the trend will continue? Many groups will kind of disband as they grow beyond the 7 year. I know some of the ones that still kept, but they're not the original members anymore, like Girls' Generation, Super Junior. But still, the many of them kind of just go their separate ways.
Yeah, and that happens in the West with like Western boy band tradition for like a group for like in the Backstreet Boys era, really going back that far. It's the 5-year curse where you only have 5 years on top of your game, and I think that's just sort of a universal. Sometimes, like if you're at the top of your game and you're the biggest thing in the world, nothing is ever the biggest thing in the world for quite some time. Though I would say BTS has certainly proven that there's a lot of endurance there. And as Dora, as you mentioned, there is still this rule that young men in South Korea have to do a mandatory conscription for 2 years. And I know for BTS, it's supposed to end at maybe somebody in the comments can correct me. Is it 27 or 29 when you have to serve? One of those years. And I believe because Jin was approaching that age, they pushed it to 30 for BTS, which is crazy that they could, sort of not change the law, but like sort of have the confines kind of maneuvered for them. But they bring in billions to the South Korean economy a year. I just read today that something like 800,000 people traveled to South Korea based on their like fandom for BTS alone, like ARMY. Oh, okay, it is 30 now. That's fascinating. And really, I hope they never break up, and I hope they continue to release albums forever.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I just bought the latest one.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, so I am a big fan. So yeah. So any other questions before we go on? So I think it's about time. Yeah.
I think some of these
we can go on forever.
Yeah, I think some of these commenters need to do a talk. They really know their stuff. They can school me.
Yeah. Well, I hope to bring back my K-pop program, when we reopen in the library again. So, I'm just, excited to see all these people interested in K-pop and pop.
Yeah. Oh, I got a question. It's who's my bias? Yoongi. That's all.
Okay.
It changes all the time. I have so many bias records, but
yeah. All right. Thank you so much, Maria. I hope everybody enjoyed the show and you all had a great time with us. So, come back again for our next program on Fantastic Tuesday. So,
yeah, thank you. And also, this is my book, if anybody's interested. It's more broadly a history of boy bands. It goes back to the 1800s, but it's really fun. There's a lot of BTS and K-pop in there if anybody's interested. But thank you so much for having me. This was such a treat.
Great. It's great to have you. Thank you so much, Maria. Have a wonderful evening, everybody. Goodbye.
Bye.